Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a topic that a lot of successful South Africans know they need, but, well, they often avoid it because it just sounds so
The
dense.
South African Trust.
Exactly. And our listeners shared some sources that really cut through all that legal jargon. They make it pretty clear that doing nothing, that's the single biggest threat to your life's work.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive,
Yeah.
to get past the dry definitions and understand the profound risk, both financial and emotional, of procrastinating on this.
Right. It's not just about clever tax loopholes. It's about honoring the decades of effort, the sacrifice that went into building that wealth in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And to set the stakes, we have a really concrete case study. It's the story of a man named Robert, and it provides that emotional hook that makes all of this so relevant.
He built an incredible business.
An engineering firm over decades, but he was facing the real possibility of watching a huge chunk of that dedication just evaporate.
And what's fascinating here, and what our sources really emphasize, is that the failure to plan, it's like a triple threat. You've got massive taxes, exposure to creditors, and a total loss of continuity.
So we're talking about structuring that makes sure the meaning behind the money continues long after the founder is gone.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's start with Robert. He was, what, 68 years old?
68, yeah. And sitting on an estate valued at around R42 million, ready to pass it on to his 3 children.
And his attitude at first was basically, look, I'm successful. I'll pay my taxes. Just make sure my kids are looked after.
Which is a completely reasonable position, for someone who's done well.
Mhm.
But the structure matters so much more than just the willingness to pay.
Before we get into the numbers, we should probably clarify a concept that's just central to this whole thing.
Estate duty.
Estate duty. For anyone listening who isn't familiar with the South African tax system, what is that exactly?
So, simply put, it's the tax the state charges on the total value of your assets when you die. There's some deductions, but for high net worth individuals, it's a massive leakage point for your wealth.
And compounds,
It
right.
compounds very quickly if your assets are all held in your personal name.
And for Robert, the numbers without a proper trust structure, they were significant.
They were. I mean, if he had just done nothing, when he passed away, his estate would have been hit with a R7.7 million bill for estate duty.
Wow.
And that's not all. If we assume his assets then went to his wife, and then, eventually to the kids, there'd be another R6.2 million liability when she passed away.
So you add in executor fees, other costs.
You're looking at a total loss of nearly R14 million,
So you're talking about losing almost a third of everything he had built.
a third, just gone. And look, that's a huge financial loss, but Robert's realization, it went deeper than just the rand value.
Right, he had that quote.
He did. He finally put his finger on the real problem. He said, it's about what the money represents. Every rand in that estate represents hours I spent away from my family building something meaningful.
If a third of that sacrifice just evaporates, what was it all for?
That just,
Uh,
it moves the whole conversation from tax planning to true legacy preservation.
Okay, so that brings us to the contrast. What did the proper structuring actually achieve for him?
Well, the difference is staggering. So Robert used a trust structure for the next 12 years. His personal estate was managed down correctly, so it was below the dutiable threshold,
Meaning?
meaning zero estate duty was paid on his personal assets. But crucially, the trust assets, they kept growing. Over 17 years, they reached R68 million.
And the estate duty on those R68 million.
Zero.
Hold on. If the trust held R68 million, why wasn't that taxed at the trust's really high tax rate? I thought trusts got penalized with higher rates.
That is an excellent and absolutely critical question, and it really speaks to the sophistication of the planning. If the trust just kept that R68 million as, say, income, it would have been subject to tax. But the trust is designed as an asset-holding vehicle, not a trading one. The planning made sure the assets grew in value without triggering those death taxes. The R0 estate duty is the key outcome here, not R0 income tax.
Got it. So what was the total benefit to the family then?
Well, you compare the R37.5 million that they would have gotten with the over R71 million that was actually preserved. The trust secured an extra R33.7 million for his beneficiaries,
It more than doubled what made it to the next generation.
simply by using the correct legal vehicle.
And more importantly, it meant Robert's personal goals were met.
Absolutely. The trust structure guaranteed continuity for his business. It ensured the engineering firm could be managed by his eldest son, who was a trustee. It set up educational funding for his grandchildren.
And there was that detail about his daughter.
Yes. Maybe the most touching part. There was a specific provision built in for his youngest daughter, whose child has autism. It ensures tailored, protected support for that specific need. The trust is still blessing that family 20 years later.
This moves us perfectly into the mechanism behind all this. Let's talk about what our sources call the Asset Protection Fortress.
It's strong branding, but honestly, it's accurate. It describes the core function. The whole idea is to create a legally compliant structure that enforces, well, absolute
The
separation.
fundamental principle being.
Separation of ownership from risk.
Okay, explain that firewall in practical terms. Why isn't it enough for a business owner to just have a registered company?
A company protects you from the liabilities of the business, sure, as long as you run it correctly. But where most entrepreneurs in South Africa fail is they blur the lines.
Mm-hmm.
The trust steps in to protect your personal assets from the risks in your business or your personal life. So if a creditor sues your company, or if you face personal liquidation, the assets held legally inside that trust are typically ring-fenced. They're separate.
So, if my home's title deed is in my name and my business gets hit with a huge lawsuit, my home is fair game.
It is.
But if the trust owns the property, the risk stays with the company and the asset stays safe with the trust.
Precisely. The moment you transfer ownership to the trust, that asset no longer belongs to you personally, so it can't be attached by your personal creditors.
Our sources pointed out some critical vulnerabilities here. What are the common mistakes that people make that just undermine this whole fortress idea?
The list is, unfortunately, very consistent. Holding valuable assets, like your house or cars, in your own name,
Okay.
or having the trading company, the one that carries all the risk, also hold valuable property. And the massive red flag, signing personal sureties for business debt.
That's the big one.
It's huge. When you sign a personal surety, you basically just collapse the firewall you worked so hard to build. You're inviting the risk directly into your personal estate.
It sounds like the trust protects wealth, not just from outside forces like creditors, but also from, internal human failure, a bad business move, a messy divorce.
Exactly. Now, we should be clear. Protection from divorce only really works if the trust is set up correctly before the marriage or relationship risks pop up. You can't mix the assets. But your core point is right. A well-managed trust shields wealth from future risks, including mismanagement by the beneficiaries themselves later on.
So it's comprehensive. Reduced personal liability, protection from lawsuits, and guaranteed continuity. Your company makes the income, the trust secures what's left.
That is the essential distinction, yes.
Let's define the trust itself a bit more clearly. What are the basic components in the South African context?
Okay, so a trust is a legal arrangement. It's usually set up with a document called a trust deed. The founder transfers ownership of assets to the trustees.
And the trustees manage those assets for the beneficiary.
Strictly for the benefit of the beneficiaries, yes. It's a separate legal person, which is the key to separating control and ownership.
And that separation brings us back to tax. You mentioned the high flat rates. 45% for retained income, 36% for capital gains tax. If the rates are so punitive, why even use a trust?
That's a fair question. It feels like a trade-off, right? The reason is trusts aren't for tax avoidance, they're for tax efficiency and deferral. That high rate is basically a penalty SARS imposes if the trust holds on to the income.
So there's a way around it.
There's a major planning tool that mitigates this. It's called the conduit principle.
The conduit principle. Okay, unpack that.
If the trustees distribute the income to the beneficiaries within the same tax year, the trust just acts like a pipe, a conduit. The income is then taxed not at the trust's 45% rate, but at the individual beneficiary's personal tax rate.
Oh, okay. So a well-managed trust uses the lower personal tax rates of the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
You're spreading the tax burden out instead of letting it pile up at that maximum trust rate.
Precisely. If you're distributing income to, say, your adult children who are in a much lower tax bracket, the tax saving is huge. But this shows why you need technical expertise. You have to manage those distributions correctly every single year.
And speaking of management, let's clarify the roles. Founder, trustees, beneficiaries. The sources really stressed a specific compliance requirement from the Master of the High Court.
Yes. For a family trust in South Africa, you must appoint at least one independent trustee. This is not optional.
And why is that?
The independent trustee ensures impartiality, proper governance. They reinforce that legal separation between the founder and the trust itself. Their job is to make sure the trust is managed for the benefit of all beneficiaries, not just the founder.
Which seems like an essential check to prevent SARS from just seeing the trust as your personal piggy bank.
It absolutely is, because that would nullify all the protection benefits. Compliance is everything. If you manage it incorrectly, if the founder just keeps treating the assets as their own,
SARS can challenge it.
SARs and creditors can successfully challenge the trust's validity. They can pierce the corporate veil. And suddenly that R68 million in assets becomes subject to that R14 million in estate duty all over again.
Which brings us to a common point of confusion. Why use a trust when I already have a will?
A will deals with the endpoint. It's a document that says how to distribute your assets after you die. A trust manages the whole journey. It protects and manages assets during your lifetime, and crucially, continues to manage them long after you're gone.
So a will leaves assets open to probate, executor fees, and eventually the beneficiary's own financial problems.
Correct. When assets pass to someone through a will, they become part of that person's personal estate. They're immediately vulnerable to their debt, their divorce, their own bad decisions. A trust, by continuing to hold the assets, shields them from all those future risks.
So for true generational wealth, the trust is the superior vehicle.
Without a doubt.
This all boils down to the three choices our sources identified. The choices that address that procrastination trap.
And the choices are stark. Option 1, do nothing. Easy, no effort, no cost today, but it's a guarantee of wealth leakage and full exposure later on.
Then option 2, I'll do it later. And this one's maybe the most dangerous because it feels responsible.
It does, but the window of opportunity is so often missed. You have to put the structure in place before the business fails, before the lawsuit is filed, before the health crisis. Waiting just means paying the price of inaction.
Which leaves option 3. Take action now. It requires commitment, it requires effort, and yes, cost. But it's the only path that actually preserves millions and secures the family legacy.
You're prioritizing long-term security over short-term convenience.
But the complexity here is undeniable. We've talked about the Master of the High Court, SARS compliance, the conduit principle. This is not a DIY project.
Absolutely not, and that's where a specialist comes in. The consultant we referenced, Lumka Sturman, her role is to navigate all this complexity. She transforms complex law and tax structures into, simple, actionable solutions.
The value is in making sure the structure doesn't fail because of bad compliance.
Exactly. It's about continuous, active management, not just signing a document one time and forgetting about it.
So they offer things like...
Well, they offer services from the initial strategy session, they call it an asset protection blueprint session, all the way to ongoing annual maintenance and fortress reviews. These annual checks are vital. They make sure that as laws change or your life changes, your structure stays compliant and effective.
It's like the difference between buying a complicated machine and making sure it's serviced every year so it doesn't break down right when you need it most.
That's a perfect analogy. The consultant's mission is to give you clarity and confidence, knowing your structure is sound and fully compliant. That saves you from a disastrous audit or claim that could invalidate the whole setup.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this, maybe sitting on a successful business or a growing asset base? It means you have the power to stop your life's work from just dissipating. Protecting your wealth secures not just your finances, but your peace of mind.
And if you're ready to commit to that option 3, expert guidance is really necessary to maximize those benefits and ensure you stay compliant.
If you're looking to identify your own personal and business risk and see if a trust is the right structure for you, the consultant we mentioned, Lumka Sturman, offers a free 30-minute structure review session to figure out the next steps. You can find that at www.lumkasturman.com.
That's LUMKASTUURMAN.com.
We saw how Robert's trust is still creating value and fulfilling his personal wishes 2 decades after he's gone.
Which really raises an important final question for anyone building wealth. When a proper structure can protect a third of your life's effort from just evaporating and can ensure your legacy actually persists, can you really afford not to prioritize long-term professional planning over short-term convenience? The risk of doing nothing is just too great to ignore.